Hal with brazosnow.com. I am at the Brazos Valley Veterans Memorial on Veterans Day weekend. I'm here with retired Army Colonel Dave McIntyre, who is the author of the book Centerline. Thank you for joining me today. Just wanted to start off and say that while this memorial here is dedicated to those who served and died, it's also dedicated to those who served and came home. And your book Centerline is focused on those who are coming home, correct?
That's exactly right. It's a little unusual. In fact, it's very unique in that it's focused on the final trip home. This book is about wounded soldiers as they're consolidated at Scott Air Force Base in Illinois, headed back home after they've been wounded for recovery. And the families who are waiting for them, the air crews who move them, and the medical teams that take care of them. Yeah, and you seem to, you cover a lot of characters: soldiers, medics, nurses, and even spouses. This is, when I first started reading the book, I initially thought it was nonfiction, and then I discovered it was fiction. I had to ask myself, and this is what I want to ask you: is this an amalgamation of real stories, or were these original concepts? Well, I did a lot of interviews. I interviewed pilots, I interviewed nurses, emergency room nurses, flight nurses, a number of friends that I'd had who are wounded, and family members, of course. I've had family members myself that deployed and families waiting at home. And so I really pulled together the stories from a lot of people and built them into characters, put them on this airplane. They're headed home for Christmas. They're headed one direction, headed home, but they're thinking back in the other direction where they've been and what they've done. And that's what the book is about. Centerline is the center line on the runway, but it also is the effort of wounded soldiers and all those who've deployed to try to get their lives back on the center line when they return.
Now, this wasn't just a solo effort. I mean, you wrote that your sons are veterans as well. They're very much involved in the making.
Well, my youngest son is a pilot who's back from his 11th combat deployment now, and he flew a number of these missions. He was my technical advisor for the aviation scenes. My oldest son is a Army ground guy, served in qualified in Ranger School, served in Korea, served in Iraq, so he was an advisor. I have a daughter-in-law who served in Iraq as a translator, and then a number of other friends and family members. Of course, my daughter-in-law at home, who's kept the home while the husband deployed, and all of them played a part. And then, as I mentioned, two nurses especially that were really valuable in explaining their roles, folks that are down in Fort Sam, Houston right now.
Well, it seems that when you read about history, it's mostly dedicated to those who the war heroes, the ones who died in service. And with the length of the war and how many people have become disinterested in it and what's really going on, and I've gotten to speak with a lot of soldiers and veterans, and they've had a tough transition coming back home. A lot of them can't even, find jobs. And is that one of those things that inspired you to write it? Was the fact that they seem to be the forgotten?
Absolutely.
The forgotten?
It isn't just those that have been wounded in the body. It's everyone who is deployed. One of the characters said, everybody who goes to war gets shot, some in the body, some in the head, some in the heart. Now, I will say, I don't think this is unique to soldiers. I don't think it's unique to the military. I think a guy who's a firefighter and spent a career cutting people out of wrecked cars, I think police officers who have the experience of taking children out of a terrible home life, anybody who's had a dramatic experience, emotional experience like that, internalizes it and has to find a way to deal with it. Centerline is the story of military characters in particular and how they try to deal with it and get back on the center line after a very long war.
Well, you've had decades of military service. I mean, how did that come into play in writing the book? Was any of it based off what you've experienced personally?
Well, when you talked about an amalgamation of characters, this really does have a large number of characters. I was thinking actually of the old television series Hill Street Blues when I wrote the book, where you have a lot of characters in one story. They have various threads, but they all come together as the story moves forward. And I find that this book speaks to Vietnam War veterans even before that, certainly guys that served with me in the Cold War. So all of those experiences for my 34 years
in uniform, and then my own son's experiences after over the last 10 years. All of those experiences came to play, and in particular, the experiences at home. I mean, the book begins with a scene in a kitchen in military quarters, where the pilot has to explain to his wife he may not be home at Christmas because he has this mission to fly wounded home, and she slowly begins to realize he volunteered for the mission. Well, that's a very realistic portrayal of the drama that plays out in military families constantly, where we have this balance of duty to family versus duty to mission. It's a tough challenge, and yes, my background and my family's background, my wife's background, all of that played into the writing of the book.
Well, I think it's one thing I noticed when reading the book was it's got you use a lot of imagery. I don't want to give too much away about the book, but the first part deals with the hunter, and having hunted myself, you can see the sights, you can see through the sights the deer, and I hate to go so far to say it feels movie-like, but is that something you intended?
Oh, that's exactly the intent. This book started in a discussion with a screenwriter who said, I'm looking for stories that we can put on the screen that would be good inspirational stories. And I said, I've been talking to my son about missions he's flown. I have a couple of friends who are nurses, and I know what they've done. I believe we could pull this into a screenplay. And he said, well, first, let's have a successful book. That makes it much easier to move forward with a screenplay. And so I approached this. I taught film at West Point when I was in the English department up there. So I approached this from the perspective of what would it look like if you were watching it as a movie. And then I described that in the book. So that's how I went about the actual descriptions in the novel. What would it look like on the screen? How would you describe that? And so I have had a number of people tell me it's a very visual novel.
And I'll bring this up again. There's a lot of people who have become disinterested in what's going on overseas and even domestically. And there's a lot of people who have zero military connection, or they haven't had a relationship with anybody in the military in a long time. What do you have to say to them? Why should they pick the book up?
I have had a number of comments from civilians who tell me the book really speaks to them because it explains things they hadn't thought of before. I had one person tell me, I've seen all the pictures on television of soldiers coming home. It just never occurred to me that they have a day-to-day life. I mean, they get Christmas trees. The husband might be too busy to put the lights up for the kids. They have soccer games they miss. They don't get to go to the kindergarten recital because they have a mission they're deployed on. And so I think it helps people to understand what military life is all like, is about, not just for those who deploy, not just in the combat, but just on a day-to-day basis. I've also had a number of military wives tell me that this book speaks for them and to them about their lives. So we really have a combination. I was shooting for two audiences. I was shooting for the audience that enjoys Tom Clancy and the technical details of flying and how you evade an anti-aircraft missile, a heat-seeking missile, and how a ground attack works. And then I was searching for the audience that's really interested in the emotional interaction of husband and wife and friends who have been wounded and that sort of thing. And I think we've been able to make the two things work together in this book.
How have, you've mentioned spouses and people who haven't been in the military, how have active personnel or veterans reacted to the book?
I think one of the strongest reactions I've had, interestingly enough, has come from Vietnam-era veterans. A lot of people have approached me. They want to talk about the characters, and as we sit and talk, it's clear to me that it's easier for them to talk about the characters than it is to talk about what they've experienced and they've done. And they're really using the characters as sort of I won't say a crutch, but a way to talk through and think through their own experiences. And so in that case, in that way, the book has been very rewarding. The reception's been very rewarding.
And what's the availability of the book? If people want to buy it, how easy is it to get?
This is really a new technology now. Amazon.com has a brand new technology that's letting us print and distribute in a new way. So it is not available in the bookstores, probably won't be for about another year. It's available through Amazon as a printed copy. It's available through Amazon for Kindles, and it's available through Barnes & Noble Nook. So those are the three ways that you can get it. We're just now beginning to roll it out to the public as a whole. It's available, as you noted, on both the Nook website and Amazon.com. We have a Facebook site for Centerline the Book, a website, Centerline the Book, and then a blog site that supports it, thinkingenemy.com. Anybody that buys a book, by the way, 20% of this goes to veterans organizations that support wounded warriors.
What, does it go straight to the wounded warriors?
It goes through us to them, and there are 10 different organizations on our sites that we support. The Gary Sinise Foundation, the Fisher House, the Red Cross, the USO, the American Legion Organization, Wounded Warriors. There are 10 different special operations have a Wounded Warriors organization they work with. 10 different organizations. I break the money up as the books are purchased.
And the book is Centerline by retired Colonel Dave McIntyre, who was also the Dean of the National War College, and you were head of the Homeland Security Council with Texas A&M, correct?
Homeland Security Program here at Texas A&M.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.